Okay, so this is gonna be my first attempt at a YouTube video, or at least some kind of video that kind of explains how I am modifying these KC Cyclone lights to add a small, kind of focusing on that, a small 12 millimeter push button switch. We won't go through the wiring on this today. It's kind of straightforward. When you get these switches, they tell you what these are. It can be a bit confusing, so make sure you look at the diagrams that come with them. Don't throw them away like I did for one set and had trial and error to figure it out. You always know that red's positive and black is your negative, but your blues, they do something special. So when I originally designed this bezel, it was actually more of a flat and did not have this indentation sticking up because I had a bunch of these. These are the V1 KCs. As you can see on the back of them, they are flat and actually, I guess, an embossed and then offset spot, where the V2s are actually inset. I hate these leads. I'm gonna cut them off. Get my cutters. So I'll work easier once I cut them off. I'm not gonna use them. I'm gonna use like heat treat butt connectors. So essentially, if you don't use a switch, it's pretty simple. This goes in here, fits like that. It actually helps because it gives you some more venting in the back. Generally, these do not get that hot under a 12 volt. I did so happen to hook one up to one of these 20 volt batteries for testing, and it literally, yeah, it's scalding hot and probably might even damage. That was on the V1s, get really hot. So I'm gonna try to keep this on topic, and I'm not gonna cut or edit this video, so I might ramble on. Hopefully I don't too much. So that's what this does, is it offset. The original design sits flat, so I had to add this in order to make this switch work because of the distance. It's inset here, but there is a problem. One thing KC did is they gave us about a 10 millimeter hole. No, it's about 8. It's 8 millimeters. Roundabout, right? And we've got to go to a 12. It's a good idea that when you order these, if you order different brands, they might be slightly different, so measure. I'm thinking about, I might end up offering this modification one day. The problem is having a bunch of these on stock cost a lot of money. I like these lights because they're only about 30 bucks a piece, and the light output is tremendous. The new design's neat because you can swap out the lenses. They're extremely durable. I've been running them for quite some time on the outside of my vehicle and other applications, and I enjoyed them so well that I figured, hey, I'm going to put some in my rear hatch because the factory lighting and any aftermarket product out there is just abysmal, very dim. So what we have to do is essentially we're going to open up this hole. The does not clear here, but we know the diameter is perfect. So we're going to open this up. So we know we need to open up a hole 12 millimeters. Best tool to do it with is this little handy dandy drill bit that I picked up from Harbor Freight. Actually, I try to pick up most of my stuff from Harbor Freight. It's in standard. I generally like to work in metric for everything. I don't know why. It's just the way I am. Generally come through and check my steps, so I know if I'm at a quarter, I'm around about 10.7. So if I bump it up to a half, I'm right about 12. It gives me a fraction of a millimeter to actually give me some play in there. So we want to go to this spot right here. Generally I'd have a marker and I'd mark it so I could see it, but You know what? I'm game. By the way, this is the first time I am doing this on these, so if I trash this thing, I will never post this video. You gotta be careful when you're using this thing. Generally, you want something to drill into. You just basically will drill in until you get a half. Let me see if I can do something so I can drill this for you guys. I didn't want to cut this video. Give me one sec, guys. Well, that ain't gonna work. You know what? Sometimes you just gotta go with it. So, I already got a hole in the table here, so I'm just gonna use it. Just check, see where you're at. Getting there. So basically what we did is we took it and we opened it up to a half. That gives you a slight little hole. If you chuck this up in a vise, you can probably make a much cleaner hole. I would be very careful so you don't bend or damage the light. Notice there's no components in there, so nothing's gonna get messed up. You don't need but a little bit of a lip. These have just a slight lip. It's not going to fall through. Then you simply just run it through. And it fits. So now you have a push button. It is recessed, which is, in my opinion, I think is nice. Because once it's recessed in there, yeah, be careful when you pull these out, them switches. Wires will come flying out at you. I'll just pull them out of the way. Yeah, just be careful so you don't pull your wires out. So that gets you a button that's recessed. So now when you mount it, you push the button. So then all you do, this is also the bolt that holds it in there. Run your wires through. That. Take your nut. That. And then you just have to figure out how you're going to throw that on. So, the trickiest part is going to be getting this in there. I don't recommend you torque it down. Good and tight's probably fine. The biggest thing you'd want to do is how to keep that from backing off. There's a couple ways you could do that. You could probably lightly stake it, or you could put you some thread locker in there. I generally do thread locker. I've even done on mine, as part of the wiring process, I ran some heat shrink right up to the threads, and then just be careful that you don't overheat this area, and you can actually heat shrink it to it. Loctite would probably work best. So that's how you would mount the light. Just make sure you really tighten that nut up. I've found that just about any bolt you put through the center will cause those to spin anyways with enough force. It's just the downside, I guess, of this design. Something I could do is I might start putting a notch that would secure into one of those vents. I'm sorry, I'm getting off track, but it's just kind of what I do. I enjoy doing this kind of stuff. Or I might put a stop bolt or something that you could just put into there to keep it from spinning. So you might see that on future ones, and I could probably modify these just to drill a little hole, put just a tiny little screw that would go in there, and you just cinch tight that would push back on the outside, that would kind of lock in. After that, it's kind of cool. Just to kind of go overview until I make a full video of these. Essentially what you do is you have to take the whole panel off the vehicle. It's not hard to do. It's a bunch of little white push pins. They basically come right unclipped. I highly recommend picking some more up on Amazon. I will try to put a link to those. If these things pick up fairly well, I'm actually considering buying a box. I actually have access to a lot of automotive fasteners. I can buy a whole box. I might throw it in with the kits for you guys to replace if needed. You know, throw in a handful or so. But essentially what you do is you put this on the back side. It spreads the load out. Push this from the other side. So essentially you have the back plate, and then you got your front plate. You would run in your 4 screws. I'll provide the stainless screws into the hole. Tighten it down. Make sure it doesn't wiggle. Of course, with anything plastic, there's going to be a little bit of wiggle. Don't wiggle too much. And then once you get that, you can pull your wiring through. The reason you need to pull that whole panel off and not wedge these up in there, which you probably could if you tried. You might end up snapping some of these. It is 3D printed material. With enough force, you'll break any plastic. You need to run wires. I highly recommend a dedicated circuit for these lights, or just about any aftermarket light. One thing I do is I actually have mine that runs into a jackery so that I can run off auxiliary power, so I'm not running down my starting battery. And eventually I hope to get a secondary battery set up. I'm already in the works on planning that out, and I have more items that will go along with that. So, sorry, I'm really horrible at YouTube videos. Never done one. So essentially you just take this plate after you have it mounted up. These 2 screw holes on here go into these 2 screw holes. And yes, it's a tight fit. And essentially you, after you wire it up, screw it in, and voila. You have it with a push button in the middle. These applications are also really nice, and I'm actually, if I can find these in a higher weatherproof rating, I'm thinking about adding them to my scene lights that I have on my roof rack, because then I'd have the ability to go around and turn ones on and off that I don't want. It'd also be cool if you could have them where they're on, and you can put a flasher module, hit the button, and it would activate the flasher module on the outside of the vehicle, so you can have marking running lights for on the trail. I hope this review or video instructions DIY helps and explains a lot of what I'm doing. Again, I'm looking at possibly doing this for you guys, for those of you who don't care to do it yourself. The only thing is, I'm pretty sure once you do that, you lose the warranty with KC. But like I said, these things have been running rock solid so far for me for the past year. At least this one has. I am fairly certain everything on the inside is just as stout. So I will be making other plates that would potentially fit this whole assembly. I'm also looking at maybe finding a light that puts out similar lumens and recessing the whole thing in there. I wanted to do that with this, but as you can see, I designed majority of this around the V1, and I'm right on the verge of hitting the edge, so it wouldn't do that. you have any questions, you can reach me at 4RNRMatt on Instagram. That's probably the best place you can reach me. Or my Etsy page. And maybe you can find me on Facebook. All right. Thank you.